She was hanging upside down from a cottonwood tree when her body started to fail. Emily Carter's hair dragged through the dust. Her wrists were pinned behind her back so tight her fingers had gone numb. The rope bit into her ankles like teeth. Blood pounded in her head until the sky looked stained and spinning. She tried to pull her knees up. She tried to twist free. All she did was make the knot grind deeper. Her lungs begged for air. Her throat made a sound that wasn't even a scream anymore, just a rough, wet gasp. Minutes earlier, she had trusted the wrong man. Thomas Reed had said he only wanted to talk. His breath reeked of cheap whiskey, and his eyes looked glassy like he hadn't slept. He wasn't trying to kill her fast. He was trying to shame her slow. He said he was sick of whispers in Abilene. He said he loved her, and that's when Emily realized love can sound like a promise right before it turns into a trap. Then he yanked her off the path and shoved her down in the grass. When she fought, he laughed. When she begged, he called her ungrateful. He tied her wrists first, then he dragged a rope over a low branch the way men do with feed sacks and saddles. He yanked her ankles up in a sloppy rush, more rage than skill, and the world turned upside down. Her dress fell wrong. Her skin burned under the sun. Her shame burned hotter than the Kansas heat. Thomas stepped back like he wanted her to hang there long enough to learn a lesson. Then he turned toward the road, and if Jacob hadn't ridden by at that exact moment, no one would have found her until it was too late. Emily kicked until her legs trembled. Her vision narrowed. She thought, "This is how I die, a summer afternoon, alone, hung up like she didn't matter." Then she heard hoofbeats stop. A horse snorted. Boots hit dry ground, fast and heavy. A shadow crossed her face. A man's hands grabbed her calves to steady her. Another hand slid up to her waist to keep her from swinging. The touch was firm, urgent, not gentle, not polite. Just survival. And that was the moment her panic snapped into something wild. "Don't get it off me." She screamed it at the hands on her body, not because he was hurting her, because she didn't know who he was, because she couldn't see straight. Because being touched while trapped felt like drowning twice. Jacob Holloway spoke low, trying to calm her. He had the quiet look of a man who'd seen war once and didn't go looking for another one. And he moved like he'd learned to stay calm when everyone else panicked. 50 years old, sun-worn, gray at the temples, the rancher everyone in Abilene already distrusted. He didn't argue. He didn't waste time. He gripped the rope, found the knot, and worked it loose with hard, practiced fingers. "It's all right, ma'am. I've got you." Emily was slipping. So he pulled her close. He caught her against his chest before she cracked her skull on the rock. He lowered her down, inch by inch, until her boots hit earth again. She collapsed into him, shaking. Air tore back into her lungs. Tears poured out of her like she'd been split open. That's when voices rose from the road. 2 riders had stopped, then a wagon, then men on foot, drawn by the scream they had heard. From where they stood, they did not see the rope first. They saw Jacob's arms around a half-dressed girl. And you know how it goes in a small town. Folks don't ask what happened. They decide what happened. They heard her yell, "Don't get it off me." They saw his hands at her waist and legs as he steadied her. And in the West, people don't wait for the truth when a story feels uglier. So tell me this. When a town believes it just witnessed a monster, who gets to live long enough to prove he was only trying to save her? The moment Jacob got Emily's feet back on the ground, the sound of relief barely lasted a heartbeat. Because relief does not travel fast in a town like Abilene. Judgment does. Out here, folks call it protecting decency, even when they don't have the X. Emily was shaking so hard she could not stand on her own. Jacob crouched in front of her and untied her wrists. He kept his eyes down, the way a decent man does when a young woman's dress is twisted and her hands will not stop trembling. He spoke quietly, slow and steady, like he was calming a frightened horse. But the people watching were not listening. One man cleared his throat. Another muttered something ugly. Someone else said, "I saw her screaming." And that scream sounded like it was aimed at Jacob, not the rope. That was all it took. By the time Jacob helped Emily to her feet, the story had already grown teeth. In their version, she had not been hanging upside down and losing air. In their version, she had been caught. And Jacob Holloway was the kind of man rumors stuck to. He was older. He lived alone. He did not drink much in town and did not laugh loud when he did. He had bought land a few years back that rerouted a water line, and half the town never forgave him for it. So when someone whispered, "That rancher's been trouble for years," it sounded true enough to repeat. Emily tried to speak. Her voice came out thin and broken. She said his name once, Jacob's name, but it drowned under louder men who were already certain. Then Thomas Reed pushed his way through. He did not run to Emily first. He ran to the crowd. His face was tight, his jaw clenched, his eyes burning with something that looked like fury. That part he played well. He pointed at Jacob and said one sentence that turned the air hard. "That's the man who did this to her." No proof, no pause, just a finger and a claim. The crowd shifted. Boots scraped dirt. Someone spit. Jacob straightened up slowly. He did not shout. He did not swing. He only said, "I got her down." But explanation is a weak thing when anger's hungry. Emily reached for Jacob's sleeve. Thomas yanked her back. He wrapped an arm around her shoulders like a shield, like a man protecting what belonged to him. And that picture sealed it. The girl crying, the rancher standing alone, the boyfriend claiming justice. By the time the sheriff's name was mentioned, the crowd had already decided what kind of ending they wanted. Jacob felt it then. That quiet shift when men stop talking and start thinking about rope. Jacob could read that look on a man's face, and it told him the night might end at the end of a rope. So here's the question you need to ask yourself. When a town decides you are guilty before the law ever shows up, who is going to stop what happens next? The crowd did not wait for the sheriff. They never do when anger feels righteous. Thomas Reed kept his arm around Emily like a brand mark. He spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. He said Jacob had no right to touch her. He said the town would handle this its own way. That word hung heavy. Way. Men began moving toward the road that led to Jacob's ranch. Not fast and not running. The kind of walk that says this is already decided. Jacob saw it coming. He had lived long enough to know the sound of boots when Mercy leaves the room. And he'd heard worse sounds long ago, when men didn't come home from the fields at all. So he turned and started back toward his land, not to hide, to stand where he belonged. Emily tried to follow. Thomas tightened his grip and hissed at her to stay put. She pulled free anyway. Her legs were weak, but her voice came back stronger with every step. By the time the crowd reached the ranch gate, the sun had dipped low. That late daylight made everything look harder than it was. Jacob was waiting by the fence. He'd left his rifle inside on purpose, because the last thing he wanted was to give them a reason. Hands open. No weapon in sight. Someone threw the first shove. Another man followed with a punch that caught Jacob on the cheek. The sound was dull and final. Jacob did not strike back at first. He backed up. He told them to leave. Thomas stepped forward, smiling the wrong kind of smile. He said one more word. Coward. That did it. Thomas came in close like he meant to put Jacob on the ground, and Jacob had no room left to step back. Jacob swung. Not wild, not angry. A clean, hard hit that sent Thomas stumbling into the dust. The crowd roared. 2 men jumped in. Jacob took one to the ground and shoved the other away. He was strong for his age, but numbers do not care about years. Emily screamed his name. Someone else yelled to hang him. That was when the sheriff arrived. He came fast and loud, gun raised, voice cutting through the noise. He did not ask what happened. He saw what was about to happen. He ordered everyone back. He put Jacob in irons not because he believed the worst, because he knew if he did not, the town would finish it their way. As Jacob was led off, he looked at Emily once, not angry, not afraid, just steady. And Emily understood something that chilled her deeper than the rope had. Saving him now meant fighting the whole town. Before we go further, let me ask you something. If you are enjoying this story, take a second and subscribe so you do not miss what comes next. Pour yourself a cup of tea and settle in. Tell me in the comments what time it is where you are and where you are listening from, because what happened after Jacob was locked up is where this story truly turns. The jail cell smelled like iron and old sweat. Jacob sat on the narrow bench with his hands resting on his knees. He had been punched and shoved, but nothing hurt like knowing the town had already made up its mind. Outside, Abilene buzzed like a nest that had been kicked. Men talked loud in the street. Women whispered behind hands. Everyone had a version of the story, and none of them matched the truth. The sheriff moved slower than the crowd wanted. That was on purpose. He had worn a badge long enough to know when noise was more dangerous than crime. He went back to the cottonwood tree first. He crouched down and studied the ground the way old lawmen do. Not quick, not dramatic, just patient. He saw the drag marks where Emily had been pulled. And right there in the dirt was the part nobody in town wanted to admit. She hadn't walked to that tree. He saw deep boot prints that did not belong to Jacob. You could tell by the heel cut and the way the weight leaned forward. And he saw the rope burn on Emily's ankles. And fresh, not the kind you get from an accident. Her wrists had a bruised ring where the knot had bitten in. Then he looked up. The rope was still there, not cut clean. Worked loose by hands that knew knots, the kind of knots a ranch hand ties without thinking. He touched the bark where the rope had rubbed raw. Then he followed the trail back toward the road. Emily was sitting on the steps outside the sheriff's office, wrapped in a borrowed shawl, staring at nothing. When he asked her to talk, she shook her head. Not yet. Fear does that to a person. It makes truth feel dangerous, but fear does not last forever. Later that night, the sheriff spoke with a man who had seen Thomas Reed earlier that day. The man remembered the whiskey. He remembered Thomas pulling Emily by the arm. He remembered hearing her say, "Stop, Thomas." One detail led to another. A boot mark near the tree matched Thomas's left heel. A length of rope from the Reed stable was missing. The knot was one Thomas used every day tying horses. None of it proved everything, but together, it told a story that no one wanted to hear. Meanwhile, Thomas played his role well. He paced. He cursed Jacob's name. He told anyone listening that justice was being delayed. He did not notice the sheriff watching him. He did not notice how lies start to sag under their own weight. Inside the cell, Jacob waited. He did not beg. He did not argue. He trusted something most men forget, that the truth does not rush, but it does arrive. Emily finally stood up. And the scariest part was this. Telling the truth meant she had to point at the man she once called her own. Her hands stopped shaking. Her voice came back. And when she asked to speak again, the sheriff knew the town was about to hear something that would turn everything upside down. The question was simple now. Would Abilene listen before it was too late? Emily stood in the sheriff's office with her hands folded tight in front of her. Her voice did not shake this time. She told the truth, slow and clear. She said Thomas Reed tied her. She said he flipped her upside down. She said Jacob Holloway saved her life. The room went quiet in a way that makes people uncomfortable. Not loud, not angry, just heavy. The sheriff listened without interrupting. He asked a few questions. Then he opened the cell door. Jacob stepped out into the light with the same calm he had carried all along. No victory on his face, no bitterness either. Outside, the town waited. Some with arms crossed, some with eyes already lowered. The sheriff told them what he found. The rope, the knot, the boot marks, the witness who heard Emily beg. No speeches, no shouting, just facts. Thomas Reed tried to speak. He always talked too much when cornered. That night, every word dug him deeper. By morning, he was the one in irons, not because the town hated him, because the truth finally caught up. Jacob did not celebrate. He packed his saddle quiet and steady, a man who had seen how fast a crowd can turn. Emily found him at the edge of the ranch. She did not apologize. She thanked him. Jacob tipped his head once and said, "No need, ma'am. I'm just glad you're safe." She told him something else, too. That being believed felt better than being rescued. That standing up was harder than screaming. Jacob nodded. He understood that kind of strength. The town changed after that. Not all at once, not perfectly. Some folks learned to pause before judging. Some learned to listen when a woman speaks. Some did neither. But one thing stayed true. A life was saved because one man acted without asking what it would cost him. That is the part worth remembering. A town can be loud, but the truth has weight, and it always lands somewhere. So ask yourself this. When everyone else rushes to decide, will you slow down and look again? When the truth makes you uncomfortable, will you still accept it? And if no one else believes someone in danger, will you step forward anyway? Stories like this remind us that courage does not always shout. Sometimes it just keeps doing the right thing while the world gets loud. If this story meant something to you, take a second and tap the like button. It helps these stories reach people who still believe in decency. And if you want more true-hearted stories from the Old West, go ahead and subscribe so you do not miss the next one. Wherever you're listening from tonight, I hope this story stays with you. And maybe next time the world feels ready to judge, you will remember Jacob Holloway and choose to see first before you decide